All right, we've got our blank, and the plan is we're going to use some Legos to build the mold box. Now, I did not have any Legos, and I don't think these are actually brand name Legos, but you can get 100 of them on Amazon for right around 12 bucks. That's what I did, and I chose the light gray because I figured it would look good on camera. Plan is to build a Lego box frame around the bait, and I want it to be about a Lego thick, or I want the thickness of the mold around the bait to be roughly the thickness of the Lego. It'll probably be a little bit bigger. And we're going to go for a 2-part mold. Actually, we're going to mold the front half separate from the back half. So there'll be 2 different molds. So the frame you see there is about how thick the frame of the mold itself will be. So what we need to do is build, which I already started building to make sure I was going to have enough Legos, build a frame all the way around. Now I have used like corrugated plastic or poster board material as the frame for the mold, but the thing I did not like with that is when I'm trying to make a 2-piece mold like we are today, it's kind of difficult to get the first half out without destroying the box, and then you end up with a oddly shaped mold, which isn't that big of a deal, but it is nice when everything's symmetrical and matches. Now my plan is to make the mold itself about 5 layers deep. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the whole thing's going to be about that thick, which should go around our bait rather nicely. Actually, the bait's going to be oriented like that in the mold, so we'll have about 2 thicknesses of Lego bricks on both sides or close to it, to the top and bottom of the mold. So the 3rd layer here is where I'm going to pause building our frame. I'm going to pause on the front half, and we're going to start construction on the back, which should be about whatever the outside of that comes out to be. Now this might end up being a little bit overkill on the mold, but I've made them before where I tried to make them as small as possible to save on the mold making material, and ended up with a really floppy mold, which in return gives you a non-consistent bait if the mold itself is flexing too much whenever you're pouring the resin in or moving it around. So I've decided on this one to not be a cheapskate and go as thick as I can, and if I end up running out of mold material and have to order more, then so be it. But cheaper isn't always better. I'll try to come in half a brick length right there. Okay, both of them are 3 layers thick, and now the plan is, because I want these to be a 2-piece mold that we can take apart. Now the plan is to take some Play-Doh, which this I did have, stole it from my toddler, a nice green color. Now I've had a surplus of experience rolling out some nice Play-Doh patties. So like I was saying earlier, our bait is about the thickness of 1 Lego brick. So I want the Play-Doh to be about the thickness of 2 Lego bricks. So it'll be somewhere in that thickness area. It'll be able to squish our bait down inside of the material like that. However, I need it to fit inside of our Lego brick tower. So I'll make a nice little indentation. Cut away the excess. Slide it into our mold. And I'm gonna be smart and start building this whole thing on another piece of wood. That way I'll be able to move the mold once it's been poured. And hopefully do some more lure painting while I'm waiting for this to cure. Okay, we got the front and the back both placed in the Play-Doh. I've got the Play-Doh coming up about halfway on the bait. That way when the mold's split in half, will be right somewhere in the center area. Only thing I just realized is I counted the rest of the Lego bricks that I have, and I don't think I'm going to have enough to do both at the same time. So we're going to start with the front half, and we'll finish building up the mold height as high as we want. And if we have enough, we'll do the back, but if not, I'll have to do that separately. But plan is now we're going to use the Sharpie and put a couple registration marks. I like to do 2 on one side and then 1 on the other side. That way, whenever the mold is formed and we take away the Play-Doh, flip it over and pour the other half of the mold, it'll have these indentions. So whenever you go to line the bait up, everything should line up. When you go to line the mold up, they'll kind of lock it in place and make sure everything's symmetrical. I think we'll go ahead and add 1 in each corner, and then these 2 on this side. That way the orientation will be correct. And that should allow everything to lock in place nicely. Now I want to go about 5 layers deep, and right now we are right at 3. So I'm going to go ahead and add 2 more layers on. And I do not have enough to be able to pour this one at the same time. Should be able to kind of see the height difference there. I'd really like 1 more layer over here, but that's okay. I'll get this one poured and then we can come back and do the other one. And for the mold material, I'm going to go ahead and use what's left in these containers, which it looks like there's more, but it's probably about right around down here. I don't know that that will be enough to fill it, but it should definitely be enough to cover the whole bait, and then we'll just measure out and pour the rest of it. Now this stuff does set very quickly. The first one I poured was kind of reading instructions as I was going, and it was setting faster. I spent way too much time mixing, and it was setting faster than I was pouring. So I didn't get the greatest mold off of it, but that was my fault. The second time I poured it, it came out perfectly. I just needed it to be a little bit thicker. So, which leaves us with bait number 3. We're going to mix it quickly, pour it quickly, and then make sure the mold is thick enough. But demold time is 30 minutes and full cure is in 24 hours. So I'm hoping later this evening I can get the second half of this one poured, and then we'll be able to put our attention on the back half. Okay, I think that's about all I'm going to get out. So we're going to go ahead and stir this up, and it says stir until there's no more streaks, or it is one solid color. Okay, and with it mixed, we're going to go ahead and start pouring. Now I'm going to pour it as a really thin stream. That way if there's any of those big air bubbles, it should let those pop or be eliminated. So we're just going to start pouring from one side. And there we have it. First section is poured. I am going to mix up a little bit more and pour it right on top there. Just that way the mold's thicker and it's a little bit more sturdy or durable. But while it is still wet, I'm going to go ahead and mix up some more so I can add it to it. All right, got more mixed up. And what I'm going to do is pour till we get to the top of the mold over here. If you can hear that humming noise, I got a little bumblebee friend just flew in the door. That's hanging out right by my head. But mold first, we only have so much time before it starts setting. And that'll be no problem because we can just add more to it later as long as nothing moves. Alright, there we go, and that puts us right at the top of that one. I'm going to go ahead and start pouring on this one. As long as it's enough to cover the bait, we should be good. Your bumblebee friend landed somewhere. Hopefully he's not on me. All right. It's important to wear gloves. So the plan is now we're going to let these set up and cure. And what I'll do is I'll demold the top half of this bait later, raise up this one by one more level, finish pouring it, and then we'll be able to flip them over and be able to pour both sides of the other half of the mold. So I'm gonna let this sit. I'm gonna try to get my bumblebee friend to go back outside, and I will see you all in a couple of hours. All right, so it is actually the next day. I did get the other portion of the small one poured. Now I'm running very, very low on how much material I have left, which is about right in there. It should be plenty to finish this, but I started getting nervous because that's all I have. I'm too impatient to order more and wait for it. So this one will be skinnier, that's okay. It's just the tail or back half of the bait, so it should be fine. So the plan now is to demold these guys. Then we'll flip the mold over, get rid of the Play-Doh, and reconstruct our frame around the existing mold. That way we can pour the second half. Now, hopefully, Play-Doh didn't stick too terrible. So, one thing I actually went to the store today to get, and another main reason I didn't pour the second half of it last night, was some Vaseline. I didn't have any. If you rub that on the Play-Doh and or your master, the stuff will not stick to it. I'm sure there's some other mold releasing products that would probably work better, but I've used the Vaseline before, and I know it works great. However, I should have had some last night because this looks like it's a bit of a mess. Now I am trying to leave our master in place. I'm not trying to pull that out. That way we can keep a nice crisp line where the mold is right there. If I pull it out, we'd probably be able to get it put back in place okay, but right now there's a good retention on there from the mold holding it in place. So I'd rather it stay put and we just clean the Play-Doh out from around it and then be able to pour the second half of it. Okay, here's the plan. I think you guys get the idea at this point. I'm going to pause on the recording, save some room on the SD card. I'm gonna get these both completely cleaned up, and then we will be back to pour the second half of our mold. All right, we got them both cleaned up. So now the plan is to cover them in some Vaseline. Now I'm not going to put any Vaseline on the bait, since we didn't on the other side. If we did on this side, it would probably give it a slightly different texture, and I want the bait to look the same on both sides. So it won't take much, just enough to kind of cover the surface, and that'll prevent the two halves of the mold from sticking together. Another way you can make the mold is if you kind of suspend the bait inside your frame, you can pour the whole thing at once and then cut the mold in half. But doing it this way, you get the little locking tabs that'll hold everything back in place. And I just like being able to take the mold completely apart. Now, if we spent more time, if I was a little bit more cautious on what I was doing, we could probably have suspended the bait perfectly in half. I got it a little bit at an angle there, but you'd be able to put in your line ties or like rattles and stuff like that, have them inside the molds. When you pour it, they would be poured in with the bait. But we're trying to keep it simple and just make a quick mold. All right, and now we are ready to reconstruct the mold, which I've got half of it already ready to go there. Now, while I was at the store, I picked up this bad boy, which has This was only $7.50, and there's 253 pieces, but most of them are small. But that should allow me to make this entire mold that I need for this side, instead of waiting for this one to dry and then pouring the back half. So the plan is now going to mix up, probably going to do almost everything I have left on this. I'll probably leave just a little bit just in case. Pour the other half of this one and the other half of this one. We'll let that dry, and then we will be able to pour our first bait off of this mold. All right, and real quick before we pour this other half, I wanted to show you this other mold that I did make and why I'm so concerned about making this one a lot thicker. So this mold is about the same thickness as the first half of this one. So you can see where the bait's at is only about that thick, probably somewhere right in that area. So even though the mold itself is this big, with the bait taking up space on the inside, only makes the wall where the bait's at about that thick. And so it's really floppy. So whenever I put the two pieces together, there's a lot of give. And so these get rubber banded together, and it kind of squishes or deforms the shape of the bait on the inside. So that is why we're making this one so much thicker. I'm going to go ahead and mix up our two halves. Alright, we're going to see where these two mixed together gets us, and then we can mix up more if we need to. Now, the work time on this is about 6 minutes, and I think it's right around 6 to 8 minutes, and it's pretty warm in my garage, so I'm going to try to do this pretty quick. The first mold, I definitely learned some things. You can see all these weird bumps up there on top. That's because I spent too much time mixing and not enough time pouring. So by the time I was actually pouring it and we got to the last little bit left in the cup, it was already kind of set in place. So it is important once you start mixing that you have everything set and ready to go, because it does start setting very, very quickly. So I'm going to go for about 2 minutes of stirring, and then the rest of the time we'll go for pouring. Then what I like to do is pour it back into the cup that the first one was measured out in. That way it gets all that off the walls in there as well. And kind of puts everything that was at the bottom of the cup towards the top. So if I'm not scraping the bottom good enough, we should be hitting it all. All right, we're going to go for a nice thin pour. If you've watched any other mold making videos, it's the same concept. Pouring a nice thin line will help get any of the air bubbles out. Then pouring nice and slow is going to help it kind of slowly seep over the bait and fill in all the little nooks and crannies. Now, I've worked with some other mold making silicone rubbers. Illumilite has definitely got it down with this product, because I don't have a vacuum chamber, and I don't do anything as far as trying to get rid of the bubbles other than pouring a thin stream like this. Now there's some in there, sure, but nothing like some other silicones I've messed with before. I've had enough bubbles in there that messes with the bait once it's been poured too. So hopefully this will be enough to cover it just like last time. And what I'll do is mix up some more. All right, and while that's still wet, I'm going to go ahead and get some more mixed up in another set of cups. Okay, there we go. One giant mess made. And 2 molds ready for sitting and curing. Now you can already see in that amount of time how this one's like already squishy. So the stuff sets very, very fast, which is pretty cool. So we're going to let these guys sit and do their curing, and hopefully when we come back we'll have 2 molds that separate nicely because there's Vaseline used. We won't be able to pour our first bait. All right, so today they have cured overnight. The second half is fully set and ready to be demolded. So I'm going to do that now. And now the moment of truth. Did the Vaseline do its job? Oh, don't you love it when something you did actually works? The edges are definitely stuck together, but I think the inside is golden. There we go. And we even got the little lines in there down on the inside and the bottom where the grooves are for the joint, which I guess this one I didn't necessarily have to make it a 2-piece mold because I do want those to stay in there. But if they don't, I can cut them out and it'll be fine. But it's still much easier to open, and then you know our little tabs are going to lock into their spot and keep the bait lined up. And this one feels way more solid than that one I showed you guys earlier. Okay. One little spot in here I'm going to go ahead and cut. And there we go. Man, you can see it did get all those little grooves, even the really fine ones that are in the fin on the side of the bait there, and the eye socket. So this one should. Oh, such a satisfying sound. Look, it even soaked into the front there. It's impressive. We'll probably cut that little part out there. There we go. Both front pieces for the top of the mold. Lock in place. Feels nice and solid. And then both back pieces, which I'm going to leave connected at the bottom there. Okay, we are finally ready to pour our first bait. But the first thing that we need to do is cut a little channel inside of the mold here. Hopefully you guys can see that okay. You can see the bait. We're going to cut a little channel inside of the mold for us to be able to pour the resin in. Now you could have used some Play-Doh and made a little channel for the pour spout whenever we were making the mold, but I like to do it this way. That way I know I have a full solid mold of our bait. So all I'm going to do is use a X-Acto knife, and I'm choosing to cut the funnel or the pour channel up right where the mouth is, since that spot's flat anyways. It'll be easy to sand down later, versus the back has that shape to it. So if we poured the resin in from the back, I don't think it would fill up correctly. So that's why I'm choosing to do it from the front, the highest point of the bait. The other thing I like to do right at the top of the mold is carve just a little groove out. That way as you're pouring, it can hit just a little cavity there to catch some of that resin. So we'll be able to pour, instead of pouring straight down in there, we'll pour right here and it'll run down inside of the mold. And we're going to do the same thing on the back. Okay, so if this seems a little chopped up and funky, that is because I filmed pouring our first resin bait with the mold, and then I used this I think they're called dongles is the actual name for them. I use this to transfer my video files onto my tablet, and I think this is responsible for corrupting them. So I lost a ton of video footage. They won't open on the computer, won't open on the tablet. Even tried my phone, tried some different things to save the files. Literally nothing worked. I don't believe in faking YouTube videos, so I'm just telling you guys I've already poured one, and spoiler alert, it works perfectly. There was on the first one, which we'll pour a new one here so you guys can see the process, and it'll probably jump back to the other video of working on the first bait. There was a little bit of some material inside here I had to cut out to make it a little bit better, but that's no big deal. So we're going to re-pour it again, so that way you guys can see step by step. The resin that we are using today is Alumilite's RC3, and it's very promising because they even have a fishing lure on the outside of the packaging. So a couple things I wanted to point out with this is you can mix it 1-to-1 mix ratio by weight or by volume, and then there's a 2-minute work time, which they are not joking about that, and the cure time or demold time is 5 to 7 minutes, and that is no joke. You literally have 2 minutes to mix the two, part A and part B, together and pour it before it actually starts setting. So you have to work very quickly with it. And I will have all this stuff linked in the description below if you guys are wanting to get some for yourself. And another thing that I'm new to with both the mold material, and this says to preheat the mold prior to casting. I've never done that before, so that's a new thing to me. So what I've been doing is just popping this mold material into the microwave for about 30 seconds, and then I'll flip them and then let them run for another 30 seconds. And that warms them up nice and good. So I'm going to pour out our resin material first, which some resin materials are by volume only or by weight only, because the part A and part B might weigh different. But since this is by weight or by volume, we're going to go for weight. And I'm set up on the ounces. I don't know if you can see that. There we go. I'm gonna put my gloves on first. So if there's something else I forgot, I'll probably piece it into here again. It's hard to remember everything I did and then which parts I missed or lost. Something else with this material is before you want to pour it, you need to shake it. You need to shake the bottle well, and whenever you shake it, that creates a bunch of bubbles inside there. So you gotta have it enough. You gotta shake it prior to pouring it, and then have enough wait time for those bubbles to kind of dissipate. That way you don't have a bunch of imperfections inside of your resin. So I'm shooting for 1 ounce. Something else that's really nice with Alumilite's material is the pour spout that's built into the bottle. I've used some other ones that are kind of like a milk jug, so it's real hard to try to pour out small amounts like this, or you have to put it into a different container first. But it seems like theirs is set up with casting small stuff in mind, so it's easier to pour a smaller amount like this. Oh, 1.7. So we are right there. It's close enough for me. And then part B. Oh yeah, and this is their tan. I've got some white and some black, so I'll get some of those poured at some point. 1.8. I was trying to make a match. I don't think you have to be that perfect with it, but we're close enough. Okay, and you might be wondering how come I didn't just mix them together in the same container and then mix and pour. Well, that is because we're going to be adding some microspheres. And what microspheres are is they're tiny, tiny glass bubbles. So what we're basically doing is changing the density of the resin. Now, I haven't tried pouring this resin yet without these in there, but some that I've poured in the past, the resin is heavy enough that it sinks. So whenever you add these in there, one, it saves on resin because it displaces some of the material or adds more volume to what you're pouring. But also the main point is to make the bait lighter, or make the density of the resin lighter. That way your bait will float. Then you can add in the lead weight where needed to make it sink or swim how you desire. So that's so for two things, mixing them or weighing them in two separate containers like this, you can get your exact amount, and then you'll be able to add in the microspheres. On this one, we're doing half a tablespoon of microspheres, which, as I already know, because this is the second one we're pouring, that it seemed like it's the perfect amount. I'm going to play with that some more and see if we can get it dialed in a little bit more, but this bait seems to be working great so far. Alright, and with the microspheres mixed into our resin, I'm going to go pop these guys in the microwave for about 30 seconds, or I guess up to a minute. Alright, so we're at 2 sets of 30 seconds, so a minute total in the microwave, and the mold is nice and warm now. And I've just got this corrugated plastic that I put on the outside, so whenever we put our rubber bands on there, we're not deforming the mold at all. That'll help keep everything nice and tight and keep the resin material from running out of the side of the mold. Give these guys one final little stir each. Now it is important, I'm going to check the time, 11:40. I'm going to mix for about a minute. And we got to be very, very quick to get them pouring. Alright, so that is right at 1 minute of stirring. I'm going to go ahead and start pouring. Now it is nice, I don't remember which, if this is some of the video files I lost or not, but I had mentioned earlier, if you're going to start doing this, I recommend starting off with a smaller bait like this one, because resin materials and then mold making materials can get kind of pricey. So it is nice to be able to do a smaller bait that's only using 2 ounces of this resin material at a time instead of something that's using 4 or 5 ounces of resin material. This one is not necessary, but if you are working with a bigger mold or you keep getting air bubbles in there, you can kind of squeeze the side of it. I don't know if you can see how that's pushing some of that out. It'll get rid of some of your air bubbles. This bait's small enough that it doesn't really seem to be a problem. But what we're going to do is, it is 11:42. We're going to let this sit for about 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and demold it. Kind of turn it sideways. So this is 11:43. It's already setting up enough, but their resin seems like it expands, so it really fills in all those cavities, and we're able to get a really nice detailed, accurate version of our mold. So 11:43, and this is already, it's, you know, a little bit squishy, but there's definitely no way we'd be able to still be pouring it at this point. So make sure you work very quickly whenever you're mixing these together. And like what's left in our can here, definitely hard and very warm. You can definitely feel the chemical reaction happening. Okay, I'm gonna let these sit for about 10 minutes or so. Come back, we'll demold them, and then move on from there. All right, I think we are right about at that 10-minute mark. And of course, the curing time will change depending on how big of a piece you're casting. So if you're doing a giant, like 8-inch glide bait or something like that, it might take a little bit longer for it to cure. But since this one's so small, it cures very, very quickly. There's the back half. What I like to do when I'm storing these is I will leave them with the rubber bands on. Kind of keeps everything locked in place. That's where it is nice to have a 2-piece mold. Comes all the way apart. And there is the front half. Now, I did want to show you guys something that's rather impressive. On our master, see if I can, I might have to zoom out a little bit. On our master, see how there's this little line right there? I don't know if it's from the wood or I smashed it with something or whatever that little groove is. the mold was able to pick up on that groove, and then this material, the resin material pouring, was able to get that detail of those little lines in there. So make sure you have it sanded nicely or don't have any major bumps. That I'm not too worried about. I think our paint and then the clear coat and everything will be able to hide that. But we have pretty well a perfect replica of our original. And then of course, gotta test fit the eye and make sure that goes. And it's a perfect fit. And then as far as cleaning up the mold, I just use a little hand saw. Just cut that off. And then you can use a sandpaper, or I like to use a sharp X-Acto knife blade. Run it right along where that seam's at, and it knocks all that off really easy. Now one thing I don't do, which you guys will see here in a little bit why, I don't go crazy cleaning up the bottom, because we're going to add some lead weight in there, and so we'll be sanding it again. So if I sanded it to perfection right now, once we come back later and add the weight and then patch those holes, I'll be sanding it again and might change the shape of the bait too much. So on the bottom, I just simply knock off the edges, get them out of our way, and then I clean up the front of the bait as well. And next step, I like to use a thumbtack to mark where I'm going to be drilling the holes for the line ties. Kind of acts like a center punch, that way whenever I start my bit, it doesn't walk all over the place. I have a couple different ideas for hooks on this bait. This first one we're going to do just normal, two treble hooks. But I have some other pretty cool ideas, so we'll bring those back in future videos. And the other thing I'm going to do is mark where I'm going to start pouring some lead weight. Now the resin is different, of course, than the wood, so I'm not exactly sure how it's going to sink or where I'm going to need the weight. So we could end up with a lot of holes in this bait, and then we'll know for our future ones, but for right now, I know I want to put some lead weight up in the front. And I know I'm going to want a little bit in the back, right behind where our joint connection is. And while we're at it, we're also going to drill out the hole for our pin. A drill press would be really nice for this. Believe it or not, I don't have one, but that's on my Harbor Freight wish list. So, line tie there, line tie there, line tie there. And then we have a hole we'll be doing up in the top for the joint, for the pin. And then we're going to add some lead weight up in the very front. And for sure right here, most likely we're going to come back and add some more weight right there as well. But we're just going to see, we're going to drill as few holes as possible and see where that gets us. And I forgot, we've got our two holes in the center where we're gonna have the hooks coming out, or for the joint. Which there's already, I don't know if you guys can see that or not, there's little bitty indentions in there from our original wood bait. And they appear to line up perfectly like they should. So I'm just gonna go ahead and mark those out with thumbtack as well. And for where we're going to be drilling out where the lead weight's going to go, I'm going to be using a 1/4 inch Forstner bit. And for reference for myself, I'm going to go in as deep as that first groove there, which I'm going to weigh the bait before and after, because my last couple build videos I didn't Everyone is asking a specific weight, how much weight I added, which that's going to differ or vary based on how big your bait is, how fat it is, what type of material it's made out of. But I will weigh it before and after so you guys can get a rough idea of how much. But know that unless you have this exact master, you're probably going to end up with different amount of lead that you'll be putting into your bait. But I will weigh it before and after for you guys. And this back one, I'm actually going to use a different bit because I think the Forstner bit might be just the same width as the rest of the bait, so I don't want to gouge huge holes coming out of the side of the bait. So for this one, I'm just going to use a regular drill bit. And the back piece of this is so small, it shouldn't take a lot of weight to do what we're trying to do. I'm going to screw in all of our line ties, which later I'm going to back these back out and we'll put some glue in there. So for now, they're just going to be a dry fit on the bait. For the pin, I like to use their stainless steel sewing needles. Super durable, and then they're super lightweight. The first couple baits I ever made with a joint like this, I was trying to use nails and I don't know, other pieces of steel wire, stuff like that. It was either really heavy or it would bend easily. But the stainless steel sewing needles, pretty durable. So you can see I need to tighten I'm going to tighten the whole thing up just a little bit more here. There we go. Look at that. I like having about that much rotation. I might, whenever I glue them in later, tighten it just a hair more. By tighten it, I just mean bring those screws in, make that gap a little bit smaller, but that should give us a good reaction. So prior to lead weight, with all of our line ties in there, we're coming in at 0.857 ounces. Going to add the weight, and then with the lead poured, 0.984 ounces. Now I think that number is going to change again because I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to add more weight in there. So, alright, I'm going to finish putting this together. Okay, so kind of butchering this a little bit, but that's okay. It's our first one, you know. I'm going to try to get that pushed down in there a little bit further, and then of course trimming this because we don't need a brush tail that's as long as the back half of the bait. But I think should be able to get it in there just a little bit more. Alright, that's not bad. I think I'll save the final push for whenever I'm actually gluing it in there. So if you're ever making a brush tail, all I did was cut up the paintbrush, laid all the pieces out on a piece of parchment paper, and then dumped super glue on it, let it harden, and then you end up with something that looks like this. Now in order to get nice sharp edges on there, if I were to take a pair of scissors and try to cut this, it would be all choppy, and it would not look very good. I want nice, straight, hard lines, so what I do is take a brand new sharp X-Acto knife blade, and I'll hold it about right where we want that line to be. I'm going to come up just a little bit, and just look at that. Perfect straight line. I always like the top of the tail to be a little bit thicker. So we're going to kind of come up like that. And since this is still really long, I add a bit more shape to it. Now we have pretty well perfectly shaped brush tail. And this is just two different paintbrush bristles mixed together to get the color variation. So I think our tail's still a little excessive for this size of bait. So I'm just going to trim it down a little bit more. Does that look juicy? Might still take it a little bit smaller, we'll see, but for now we're going to leave it alone. And now I'm going to go ahead and put our hooks on and our pin in so we can have everything that's going to be on the bait for the weight to be correct, to see how it reacts in the water and if we need to add some more weight or not. There we go. It's actually looking like a finished bait now. I think I need to tighten our bottom joint there a little bit. I don't like how far out that goes, so I'll probably tighten that up just a hair. But it's time to drop this bad boy in some water and we'll see if we can get it sinking perfectly. So I think I want it to be a little bit heavier. So my fix for that while I'm testing the bait, it seems like it's performing good, but it could be a little bit better. I definitely want this bait to sink. I don't want it to be at the surface. So what I do is looking at the camera backwards, I'll take one of those little split shot weights, clip it to a rubber band, and then we'll be able to slide it exactly where we want it on the bait to see if it makes it react any different. So at the moment, oops, sorry guys. At the moment, I'm just going to put it right there, and I'm going to put it back on my little test rod here. So there you go. Got it. That's where I was thinking I would need it. So we'll see if it makes it behave any different. So definitely sinks, so it could be too much weight. See I think that a little bit more weight helps balance the bait better, so we get a nice, or like a more consistent lazy swim. Hopefully you guys can see that okay on there. So the whole point of this bait was slow retrieve, you get a real lazy swim. Just a shad chilling in the Sunday afternoon. A little faster. And that's what it was doing before we added the other weight. Whenever I went faster, it didn't seem like it really liked that, or was wanting to blow out. And then, dead shad. It does turn all the way around, so that's pretty cool. And if you're fishing with an actual rod with more slack in the line, you could probably get a little bit better tension out of it. So I'm going to try moving our weight right behind that hook tie there. See if that makes a difference. I actually kind of like it better. I think there's a very little difference there, but it seems a little bit more responsive, like in the nose. See about our lazy swim. Nice. Faster. Woohoo! All right, I think I think that's our answer. Go right behind that first hook tie. I think that's what we'll do. We'll put our weight right behind that hook tie right there, and I'm going to use that smaller drill bit we use, not the Forstner bit, because we don't need much. And then we will patch those holes, and this bad boy will be ready for paint. Alright, so now to patch these holes, I don't know if you saw whenever I was pouring that one, I had it all the way at the surface. I used one of the line ties, screwed it into the lead, pulled it back out, and I was able to get that lead to weigh the exact same as that little split shot one that we were using. Drilled the hole just a little bit deeper, that way the lead would go in further so we can patch the hole easier. Now that was the whole point of not gluing in at least the hook ties, was because we're going to patch these and I wanted to be able to sand all of this at the same time. If that hook tie was glued in, it'd be kind of hard to sand it smooth. And then did not want to glue these in because I wasn't exactly sure how far, and I was gonna have to screw them in for it to fit, but now we know, so I'll be able to glue those in as well. So to patch these holes, what I'm gonna do is actually something about like that, just making a little pocket there. And what I'm going to do is mix up resin to pour another bait, go ahead and pour the other bait, and then the leftovers we'll pour in here to be able to hide where the lead was. The other thing you can do, of course, is the baking soda and super glue, but since I'm going to be pouring another bait anyways, okay, there we go. That was a success, I think. I'm worried I didn't mix them good enough because I was worried about having to pour both those and that. So definitely going to do something different as far as plugging the lead weight holes, either the baking soda and glue or making some resin little plugs that we could just glue in place and sand flush. But I'll let these cure for 10 minutes, then we'll get these guys finished up, and now I've got another afternoon project ready to go. Which I guess I didn't get this mixed up good enough. See how easy that is to cut that off there? So that was a fail. However, this part, I guess that might not be mixed good enough either. So that's what it looks like when you don't mix the resin good enough. It's more like cutting styrofoam than it is cutting plastic. Alright, so it's not actually as bad as I thought it was. This is rock hard. This is exactly how it should be. So I don't know if whenever I'd poured these little spots, if it was just like a little mixture that wasn't quite stirred good enough, or if the resin doesn't like being poured in such a small amount. I'm not really sure on that. That's going to be more of a trial and error, and only here at Baker Builds will you guys see all my screw-ups along with the successes. Since this one works as hard as rock and just like it should be, it was something to do with how I poured it, or it wasn't mixed correctly. So I'm just gonna go ahead and finish cleaning this up, and then I'll use the baking soda and super glue to patch the rest of the holes, and then I'll get all of the line ties and everything glued into place. So that pretty well wraps up for today's video. Hopefully you guys found some useful information mixed in there. I did get a couple more poured along with this black one, which I was trying some magnets on the bottom to hold the hook in place. Also wanted to give a shout out to Alumilite. I'll have them linked in the description below. They did send over the resin and the mold material like 6 months ago. So sorry guys, it took me so long to get this video out, but better late than never. Next video, of course, is going to be painting this bait, and I've got a lot more ideas. As luck would have it, though, literally the weekend I'm getting this video finished, it is snowing outside. So as far as swim videos and catching fish is kind of out of the picture at the moment. I do have a good video of it swimming posted as a short, which I'll have that tagged at the end of the video if you want to see that. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will catch you in the next video.